Number 2, acceptance. It is what it is, and I can't change it. While this sentence may sound defeatist, most of the patients I hear it from don't mean it that way. They simply mean that they are clear they're not going to use their energy to argue or fight or push their way out of the situation, particularly when it's not a situation that can be changed. In her book, Kitchen Table Wisdom, doctor, author, and counselor Rachel Naomi Remen tells a story about when she was 35 years old and learning to make jewelry. She cast a beautiful silver ring, her first, and was very proud of its design. She took it with her to a local retreat on the California coast and showed it off. At the attendees' recommendation, she took her ring to show a local jeweler. She writes, "The jeweler, a gentle man and a gifted artist, had offered me tea, and we spent an hour or so talking about beauty and the ways in which art reminds people of the soul. Heady conversation for a young academic physician. In the end, I left my ring with him so that he could recast it and sell it to others. During the night, a wild and violent storm hit the coast. At breakfast, I was shocked to hear that a stretch of Route 1 had fallen into the ocean. The gallery where I had left my ring had stood next to the stretch of road that had washed into the Pacific. The building was gone, and my ring with it. Through my numbness, I could hear several inner voices commenting on my loss. The loudest was my father's, saying, 'This never would have happened if you hadn't allowed a total stranger to exploit you and make a profit from your design.' And my mother, 'You are so careless. You can never be trusted with anything valuable.' In anguish, I went to the edge of the cliffs and stood looking down at the Pacific, still wild from yesterday's storm. Down there somewhere was my ring. As I watched the ocean hammer the cliffs, it began to occur to me that there was something rather natural, even inevitable, about what had happened. Pieces of the land had been falling into the ocean for millions of years. Perhaps all those blaming voices were wrong. There was nothing at all personal in it, just some larger process at work. I looked at the empty space on my finger again. For the first time, I faced the loss with a sense of curiosity. What would come to fill up this space? Would I make another ring? Or would I find another ring in a secondhand shop, or even in another country? Perhaps because he loved me, someone I had not even met yet would give me a ring. I was 35 years old and I had never trusted life before. Life had been about hanging on to what you had. Yet this empty space had become different. It held all the excitement and anticipation of a wrapped present. Patients I meet who are able to accept major changes in their life and health see clearly, often from experience, that to fight what we are given is to miss the chance to be in connection with nature and with the timeless stream of life. Which brings us to number 3, faith. God has helped me through this before, and God will help me through it again. In my experience with patients, this is often a personal creed that has been born from experience. I've met patients who only narrowly missed being killed in war, who have been through cancer 4 times, who have grown up homeless on the street, who have buried all 3 of their children. Life has taught them that they will get through it. For some, they do this with the help of God or higher power. For others, it is a general belief in the order of the universe and that things are as they are supposed to be. For others, it is a deep belief in oneself and others who will help. In the words of Albert Camus, in the depths of winter, I finally learned that within me there lay an invincible summer. Episcopal priest and author Barbara Brown Taylor writes, "Popular religion focuses so hard on spiritual success that most of us do not know the first thing about the spiritual fruits of failure. When we fall ill, lose our jobs, wreck our marriages, alienate our children, most of us find it hard to shake the shame of getting lost in our lives. And yet, if someone asked us to point to the times in our lives that changed us for the better, a lot of those times would be wilderness times. When the safety net has split, when the resources are gone, when the way ahead is not clear. The sudden exposure can be both frightening and revealing. We spend so much of our time protecting ourselves from this exposure, the weird kind of relief can result when we fail. To lie flat on the ground with the breath knocked out of you is to find a solid resting place. I think Barbara Brown Taylor is right in her assessment that most religion, Unitarian Universalism included, doesn't talk enough about times of loss, failure, and having the wind knocked out of you. But I think we would do well to go back and revisit a great sermon of one of our greatest Unitarian ancestors, Theodore Parker. Reverend Parker preached a monumental and historically significant sermon called The Transient and Permanent in Christianity that I understand Leslie talked about last week as well. It was preached in the year 1841, and at that time in history, his sermon was considered scandalous. And as a result, Reverend Parker was ostracized by many of his colleagues. In it, he posited the ideas that Jesus was fully human and that the Bible is not infallible. He also advocated that the structures of church and religion are transient and of less importance than the actual teachings and words of Jesus. He admonished his listeners for placing their energies into arguing about doctrines rather than focusing on the real work of being true to Jesus' teachings. He said, "So the Christianity of Jesus is permanent, though what passes for Christianity with popes and catechisms, with sects and churches in the 1st century or the 19th century proves transient." The context of his sermon and the historical development of Christianity and Unitarianism is fascinating, but that's for another sermon. Today, I want to consider it on a personal level. The structures we build, whether our homes, our businesses, even our churches, are worthy of our time, but transient. We are called to figure out what things in our life are permanent, not to be shaken by the ever-changing nature of life. Hear again the words of Barbara Brown Taylor. To lie flat on the ground with the breath knocked out of you is to find a solid resting place. This, to me, is the gift of change, as I have seen it through my own life and the eyes of the patients I work with. It forces us to grow in our abilities to stay connected to the permanent rather than the transient. It challenges us to root our lives in the most important things, like gratitude, acceptance, and faith. I'm very thankful for my year here as intern minister. It was a time of great transition for me, and this community supported and loved me through it. It seems churches are almost always in the midst of some transitions, whether changes in pastors, staff, church leaders, or buildings. In my experience, this church was, and I hope still is, a place that embraces and lives gratitude, acceptance, and faith in times of change. In the end, the truth is that I may know where I'm going. Whether or not I make it to work and to the grocery store and to the bank are uncertain. But we can look at the changes in our lives as opportunities to remember that we can be in control of the things that truly matter. I am going to stay true to myself. I'm going to stay true to God as I understand God to be. I'm going to keep trying to be a better person. I'm going to accept my place in the larger context and stream of life. I'm always going to remember how fortunate I am. While you and I may not want to be on the road again, some of the remarkable patients I work with have shown me that it is in fact possible with work to always know where you're going. Blessed be. Amen.